There's some other stuff I wanted to talk about. I'm not sure what. Mm, I think it relates partly to this issue of boundaries and keeping boundaries with things. Right. I think partly it's that the cool thing about this whole situation is that if you're lazy about boundaries, like if you find it difficult to face your fears and do things that you want to do, but you're afraid of what people will say, you're afraid of the consequences it'll have socially around you, then feeding your emotions is a really good way to get into that. Because um, feeling your emotions just leads to making that action unavoidable. It becomes unavoidable to make that action as long as you feel your emotions. And meditation, for example, is a way of absolutely like forcing yourself to feel your emotions. There is no escape as long as you just keep to the schedule. And the schedule can be as short and as easy as you want. You could meditate for 1 second every week, and it would still be a schedule. Hopefully, I think the idea would be to do it daily, though. 1 second every day. And then at some point, you might feel comfortable doing 2 seconds, and gradually you might go up. You know? In fact, I think it would be, again, almost like inevitable to go up in time until, like, whatever you felt comfortable with. So that's pretty cool. The fact that meditating uh, makes it easier to do things. That's the crazy thing, because meditation is literally not doing anything. You're sitting down and you're not doing anything. And somehow that makes it easier for you to do precisely the kind of things that you're afraid of doing. So before, right, maybe you would have tried to tackle the things that you were afraid of doing by forcing yourself to do them. And I think that's good. There's a good in that, in really just persevering in effort. But there's also something good in meditating until it becomes unavoidable. You're like just forcing yourself into it. That can be easier too, depending on the situation. So I think that's cool. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for that reality where you can where difficult things are not disconnected from easy things, and somehow the easiest thing of all is connected to the most difficult things, and so on. I've also been thinking about silence and self-expression, and I was just watching a really good video by Case for Infinity, a channel. Like he posted a video, really like a relaxed sort of personal video where he's just talking about his life and things that he thinks and is interested in, for just for as long as it feels good to do so, you know. And he emphasizes at the start of the video that he doesn't he's not trying to make a polished video that's sort of presentable to others, because he doesn't he says like he doesn't want to respect other people's time. I thought that was, or it doesn't respect other people's time. I thought that was a powerful sentence. And I think it's true, like in the sense that I think that's a good thing to say. I think that it's fine to respect people's time as well, but I think it's very good to not respect people's time when it comes to art. When it comes to art, I think it's really good to not respect people's time. See, that's in a sense another thing I'm realizing recently, and it also kind of relates to capitalism, is that my whole attitude towards art is slightly shifting a little bit. And I can notice this the most in music. Because I've been making music recently, so I've been going through this process recently, right, where I've been feeling more and more emotions. Like allowing myself to feel emotion beyond what I usually allow myself. Like I can notice that there are thresholds that usually would have been, they would have meant that I would retreat into escapism of some sort or defense mechanisms of some sort, and I can feel myself reaching that threshold and passing it. And not passing it exactly, allowing it to be passed if it is to be passed, allowing it to be passed by the emotions, allowing the emotions to come beyond what I usually allow. And it's been really interesting. It's been really nice. But one of the effects it's had on my, in this case, my music making. What effect has it had? The effect it's had is that I now have been making music recently that expresses emotion. And by that I mean it expresses whatever emotion it is that I'm feeling while I'm making it. In practice, what this has ended up meaning is that I'm starting to make music that's very like how do I say this? Weird. And I don't mean this because like my emotions are weird or something. I don't think this is a personal thing. I think it's because when we hear music and we recognize that it conforms to certain standards, right? It's because we're trying to appeal to an audience. Even within us, we're trying to appeal to an audience within us. Like we treat ourselves as a listener too. You know? And that's interesting, right? You can make music where what you're trying to create is a good piece of music. And again, that's interesting. I like that. A lot of the music that I like and a lot of music I like making involves just this pure sort of craft of a good music, a good sort of song that is nice and good to listen to. But at the same time, if you just get lost in that, you can stop actually expressing whatever it is you're feeling. Because, for instance, you might be feeling a certain way that leads you to include dissonance in your song. And that might clash with your idea of what a good song should be. So there's that balance. And there is also, again, like the keeping the audience in mind, both for yourself and for others. It involves a lot of control from the ego, I think, at some point. And when you really allow yourself to just make things based on how you feel, the weird thing is that they start to make sense. They start not making sense. Like, my experience is that I have a strong desire to edit. And it's funny, isn't it? Because it's in complete synchrony with my desire or my tendency to censor my own emotions, to defend myself against them, limit them, escape from them. That same thing happens in music. Whenever something happens musically, I compose something and it leads towards a direction that makes me feel, or doesn't make me feel, but that expresses something that I'm not comfortable with emotionally. I'd be like, edit that, change it. Until I get a song that expresses something emotionally that I like and that works. I think there's something good in doing that. I think there's something important in doing that. But it's also good to allow yourself to, like, I've been realizing it's good. You can allow yourself to express something, and first it won't feel good. It'll feel like the first song you make, for example, will be like, okay, yeah, like this is definitely a song that has come from how I felt, but precisely because of that, it's not good. You know, it feels too much like a what do you call it? Like a plaster? No, thing you sort of put on to heal wounds. Those little sort of sticker things. um, it feels too much like one of those, like something. It feels like, yeah, like a balm or something that heals you. Uh, like you've done it just to de-stress yourself, and you think, well, who's going to enjoy listening to that? Like, not even I enjoy listening to that. It's just the product of a stressed out mind, or of a mind that's feeling emotions in a way that it can't handle, has created this weird sort of jagged song, and it's not really that nice to listen to. But I've noticed that if you're making several songs, if you continue expressing yourself, and you make what we tend to call an album, right? If you make a collection of songs, you make the second one, the third one. If you really like allow yourself to make music without editing it so much, at some point, all those songs will start to work together. And that first song that didn't work on its own, you're like, ugh, this song is weird and jagged. It'll work in symphony with the others, in harmony with the others. Mm, uh, and that elicits a sort of order that's outside of your control, right? It's precisely by giving up control and saying, okay, I'm not going to edit or control what comes out. I'm just going to express whatever comes out, and if I like it, good. If I don't, it's okay. It's like exactly like meditation, right? You're going to sit down in meditation, and maybe you're going to feel things that are nice. Maybe you're going to feel things that you don't like, but it doesn't matter because you're going to meditate anyway. And you're going to wait till the timer rings, and when the timer rings, you're going to get up, and that's it. It's the same with music. The practice deepens. You make the first song, the second song, the third song, and after a while it deepens in a way that affects even the previous melodies. And at the end of it, you have this whole thing that's completely different from what your personality tends to sound like. It has a sort of order to it, but it doesn't. It's not an order that has come from such a rigid control of the ego as it usually does. And the funny thing, the irony, I guess, that in the end, I find, for me at least, as a listener, it ends up being more interesting than what I could have expected. It starts not being interesting, right? It starts being uninteresting. And then it becomes very interesting. So what I was saying this obviously in response to the video thing, which is, okay, the idea of not taking your audience into account, or not worrying about your audience, not caring about, not respecting the audience's time, let's say. In a sense, there is something about this that is very respectful, I think. I'd like to argue for that. Because if you don't respect someone's time in art, what it means is that you You value their capacity to decide for themselves what to do. You know, everyone can decide what they want for themselves. And if someone doesn't want to watch something or doesn't want to listen to something, they can just not listen to it. And I mean this in the sense that this world doesn't allow for that. Like, it really feels like entertainment in hyper-capitalism is so redonkulously oriented towards the viewer or the consumer. Obviously, because it wants the consumer's attention. That's how it even can survive, with the consumer's attention, and therefore complicitness in maintaining the system alive. It's so oriented towards the consumer that it's disrespectful. Like, you could say almost like valuing the viewer's time can actually also be disrespectful. Respecting the viewer's time can be disrespectful. There are videos on YouTube that are so catered to like every little thing that could potentially annoy the audience has been snipped out. There's probably all sorts of analytics that say, oh, videos in which I mention death seem to annoy my audience, so I'm going to stop talking about death. Videos in which the color filter is green are better, or whatever. I doubt it, but right? You end up. First of all, there's a fine line between that and mind control, right? Are you really respecting the audience? Or are you like forcing them to watch your video, right? It's the usual debate we have around social media and things like that. But it's like, if you're catering to someone, you're kind of manipulating them. See, that's the funny thing, because it's basically the nature of people pleasing. If you're people pleasing, you're manipulating. It seems like you're being the extremist, most friendly, respectful you can be, right? That's what it sounds like on paper. People pleasing, great. Obviously, it isn't. It's by doing exactly what you expect other people to do, and learning from them and learning what it is they want, and then being able to emulate even more and more and more with better efficiency exactly what they want. At the core of yourself, there is still a will directing things. And if it's an unconscious will, it's going to be very possibly id. So it's going to be sort of pleasure seeking and pain avoiding. Obviously, we all know that like people pleasing, you can define it as a form of conflict avoidance. You decide to do exactly what the other person wants, because that way you avoid having a conflict with them. You avoid having a conflict of opinion or a conflict of will, you know? Is the theory behind it. Behind the mechanism. But it's not just conflict avoidance, it's also pleasure seeking. And both are happening unconsciously, which means that you will be directing the way in which you're making the other person, in the way in which you're agreeing with the other person, will be subtly and unconsciously directing the other person towards behaving in ways that create a structure that allows you to be pleased as well. Because people pleasing, in a sense, is a loss of will, you could say. You don't get to choose. If someone says, let's do this, you say, yes, let's do this. You don't choose between this and that. You choose whatever it is that the other person chooses. whoever that person may be. It'll be everyone around you if you're pleasing everyone, right? So it's basically a process by which you stop choosing what it is that you're going to do, and you lose your will. And what that means is that your will, it doesn't disappear. It still exists, but it then exists. It exists unexamined, and unexamined will seems to be related to id, to a form of id at least that is when I say id, I don't really know the Freudian terminology that well. When I'm saying id, I'm basically meaning like unsocial id. So like extremely ego-driven, egocentric id. Pleasure for yourself and pain for yourself at the expense of everything else, of any other kind of consideration and order. So obviously, that's why, to me, it seems like capitalism is just an expression of that. Capitalism is just like ego-driven id turned into structure. Basically, maybe what it is, you could say, is like it's a whole bunch of humans all together, extremely ego-driven, living together. The kind of social structure that is going to emerge from a bunch of people who are very ego-driven is an ego-driven system. And that's, I think, what capitalism is, an egocentric id system that just is people-pleasing. But the person that it's pleasing is the culture or something. It's or the yeah, it's the same mechanism, but it's abstracted out or something. And it has to do with time, right, as well. That's why valuing your time, like that's the thing, what I'm saying, entertainment under capitalism needs to value time. It values your time. It values the creator's time. It's trying to value and optimize time. It's all about, like, in a sense, time. We're sort of finding ways to optimize everything and so on. But we want to optimize it not so that life is better, but so that the optimization can then become more optimized or something. It's just a pure like abstraction. And so I think that not valuing time is an extremely good thing to do. Meditation in a sense is the best way of not valuing time. And at the same time, it's the most incredible way of respecting time or loving time. Right? Meditation is good for nothing. It's a good for nothing practice. And so anyway, I think that some of that is like needed in our culture. A little bit of not valuing time. Because in not valuing time, something else comes out, something else emerges, as it does in meditation. Let's look at this, for example, this video, or things like that. It's hard to know exactly what it is that I'm doing. Am I not valuing the viewer's time? Or, again, as I said, am I just learning to respect other people as individual agents who can decide how to watch things, when to watch them, what to watch, and so on, right? Which in a sense is totalitarianising me or whatever. Like, having a too much of a people-pleasing attitude is like a totalitarian thing, because you're like, as I said, by not valuing people's time, I'm learning to detach from whatever it is that people do. If not, it seems like I'm extremely concerned with what people are doing, right? All forms of social anxiety, like extreme concerns of like, this person is doing that and this other person is doing this, and it's not making me feel very good. It kind of works under the assumption that actually, in order for me to feel good, people should behave in a different way, and then I would feel better. Or, in other words, we should all structure ourselves and organize our behavior and our time in such a way that I feel better. Right? Anyway, so by not valuing that, you start respecting other people more, I think. But also, it begs the question, what am I doing towards myself? Am I respecting myself here? Am I valuing my own time? You could say, well, I'm in some sense, I'm not. Because I'm just trying to allow myself to prioritize expression over time. Actually, okay. So, what was I saying? I'm not valuing my own time. Because I'm valuing self-expression. That's funny. It's like self-expression is outside of time somehow. If I value... See, I'm not valuing time because I'm trying to be happy with taking as long as it takes. And if I need to spend 10 minutes in silence while I wait for something to say, then I could do that, And it wouldn't affect the viewer and it wouldn't affect me either. It would simply be a non-valuing of time. And you could also say that it's more than that. I'm also not valuing material resources, right? If I'm spending electricity and storage space, which implies also a material sort of expense and so on, in making this video and so on. I think that's sadly true. And that is a value I would like to value. I would like to value material resources, but and I think that there's a whole reason for that. I think that I want to value material resources because material resources are shared. They have less of an aspect of will in them. Time is like, if someone doesn't want to spend their time watching this video, there is more of a component of will. They can choose. If I don't want to do this, I can choose. Material resources is more of something that once it's spent, once it has been non-valued, it affects the lives of everyone. So it's not so easy to choose. And so I think it's important to value it. It's more collective. But that is precisely the problem. And that's the predicament that we find ourselves in. And that's why I want to talk about this stuff. Because we seem to be in a situation now where we're repressed. That's my conclusion, at least. We're emotionally repressed. We need to find ways to become aware of this stuff and feel these emotions. And I think that a lot of these ways, in the kind of isolated world in which we live, are going to have to be via internet expression somehow. But internet expression is part of the process by which the material resources are being destroyed. and not valued. It's ironic. It's like giving value to something in a price sense actually can have the consequence of not valuing it. If suddenly like wood is very valuable, then we destroy a rainforest, right? We don't value the rainforest precisely because it has become valuable. Anyway, so it's part of that machine. But I think that we need, precisely because it's, see, that maybe one way to look at it is precisely because it's already happening. It would be good to direct the force in which it's happening towards a discussion of consciousness, bringing all this to consciousness. And the kind of discussion, I think, that is required is one in which time is not valued. Because valuing time is precisely what got us here in the first place. And I mean like an excessive valuing of time. So that's the irony of this. And it's the irony of meditation again, which is that when things become more like difficult and it seems like you're in more of a moment of crisis where action is most immediately required, it seems as if in those moments meditation is the most useful. And yet meditation is the absolute opposite of taking action on something. Under a specific, under like a capitalist lens. At least in practice, I mean. Meditation is obviously fetishized and like meditation has been turned into a thing as well. But in practice, it stops being that. And what I mean is an actual practice of meditating every day erases that possibility. That's why meditation, the only way it can be sold, even if it's sold as something that will enlighten you and give you spiritual growth, all it means is that it will like again it doesn't point towards the actual practice itself. No matter what you say about it, doesn't point to the practice itself. That's the whole point. So yes, it seems like in moments of most crisis, it seems like sometimes the counterintuitive thing is necessary. Why? Because the intuitive thing, the thing that's intuitively necessary, is very likely being built on the intuition that you have gained from your culture. So it's possible that the thing that you like, oh, this is super urgent, we need to do this now, is precisely coming from the roots in which the problem is being formed. The problem that you're in is making you act this specific way that you think is so like it's going to really solve the problem. The solution and the problem are coming from the same root. So like in this case, you could say capitalism is like a hyper kind of maximization of efficiency, you could say, or something, right? It's like, I don't want to have to wait 2 days to get to my neighboring city. I want it to be faster, because there is no time to lose. If you lose time, you can't be even more efficient or whatever, right? Like it's a hyper valuing of efficiency or something, and so because we live in that mindset, whenever we want to like do something about the kind of suffering that capitalism is connected with, we say, well, it's super urgent. The world is collapsing. We need to do something, and we need to do it efficiently. We need to do it efficiently because there's no time to lose. And then it's like, well, but it's exactly the same attitude that got you there in the first place. It's the capitalist attitude is making you want to fight capitalism. I think it's good to fight capitalism. I just mean that like it's it's maybe not good to do it in exactly the same attitude that is generating the problem in the first place. But that's just my opinion. I may be wrong on this, because this, after all, is my analysis of the situation based on all sorts of simplifications, which again are also just coming from the situation in which I am. So I'm probably just analyzing this from within the structures in which I'm analyzing it, etc., etc. That's why material action is so important, and by that I mean meditation, because meditation is literally like, it's funny. In a sense, meditation is not doing anything. It's sitting down and not doing anything. In another sense, it's the most doing thing you could do. It's actually doing something. It's sitting down and actually sitting down. Actually stopping all the other stuff that you're doing. That's a pretty, it's a definite thing. It's not just an idea in your head. And this sense of wasting time is where anxiety comes from a lot of the times. And so anxiety is what drives all this. I don't think anxiety is going to do anything good for the situation. So acting out of this fear of missing out on time, I think needs to be valued, but not too much. Again, you need a little bit of that. You need a little bit of that. But I think that I feel from my perspective that we're in a situation now where we just need to stop valuing time so much, basically. But that's where art comes in, because as I said, I think this has to happen in the domain of art. It's hard to know where the limit is. But see, because I do want to value people's time outside of art. Right? I'm not going to spend 40 minutes, yappering on to someone, hopefully, in other situations. Or if someone is busy or something, like I think there are things you need to take in mind. But in art, it's different, because in art, things become symbolic somehow. Suddenly this is an image on your screen, this is an image on the screen, and you can do with it what you want. I think that's what's important about art. What I mean by art is a situation in which the viewer of art is free. There may be artists that challenge that sort of definition, I don't know. But to me that seems like a good starting point, an important aspect is like consent. That if I'm at a museum and I'm looking at a painting that's extremely disturbing and scary to look at, I want to have chosen to look at it, and I want to choose to continue looking at it. Right? If someone took me there without... See, I really don't like it when art does that, and maybe I've done this myself, I'm not sure, over the years, but it's something that right now bothers me. It's sort of like surprise shock, when it truly isn't announced. Like if I'm watching a horror movie, obviously I want to be shocked. If I'm in an amusement park or whatever, I want to be shocked. Sure, there are all sorts of situations where you want to be shocked. That's part of the consent. That's part of why you went there. But if I went to watch a really relaxing movie that's advertised as if it's really relaxed, nowadays that wouldn't happen, because obviously everyone would know. If there's some shock value in it, you would know before watching it. But imagine you go to watch a film and you're in a really sort of sad mood. You don't want any kind of nasty content. You just go to this movie, and suddenly in the middle of the movie, like there's a horrific scene that is completely clashes with the mood of the whole thing. And imagine that you can't exit the cinema for whatever reason, right? Like it's closed. You need to wait until it's open. Well, obviously that's sort of like Clockwork Orange style stuff. It's trauma. To me, that's trauma. It's just, it may be, you can define it how you want. You can say it's a tiny trauma, it's a light trauma. I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, depending on the situation, the person. But it's trauma. I think that it's important to have some sort of knowledge of what you're getting into, and to have some sort of consent into what you're getting into. Maybe it doesn't have to be black or white, but it has to be some sort of consent, and that's why art, I think, is such an important domain. If it is a domain in which you're able to feel emotions that you would usually maybe not feel, not want to feel, or whatever, but you're consenting to feeling them. You're like, yeah, I know this artist is a little sort of like, disturbing or whatever, or it's really sad, or the opposite, it's really funny, it's really whatever, and I'm gladly going to go in there and feel whatever it is that I'm going to feel. And I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to feel. That's why it's art. You don't know it. You didn't make it. So it's an unknown. There's a specific mystery there, sure. But you consented to that mystery. I think that's important. And that's that's an area in which the devaluing of time is good and important, I feel. Or at least if you find yourself in a position where you just can't follow boundaries. Like, I personally feel like this is necessary for me, without going into the whole like big, grandiose stuff. Uh, I find it so difficult to keep boundaries, and that's part of my uh, reason for valuing time. Personally, I think it has been built out of a desire to please others, right? To not express myself at my rhythm and in my way, but to express myself in whatever rhythm and way is agreeable to others. And so I think, again, art is good for that. It's an opportunity for me to do this, somewhat safe in the knowledge that it's not going to um, be a complete inconvenience to anyone, because no one is forced to watch it, right? Knowing that this is something that people are going to freely watch makes me know that I can safely, it's a safe, space in which to express myself, uh, and do it in whatever way I want and in whatever order I want and slowly, and okay, it's no problem. I think this is one of the big values of social media. Like, I really feel like social media, in a way, like if I were to get woo woo about it, I would say that this is what social media is trying to do. I think that social media, as an entity, as a living entity or something, is something that's trying to help us to express ourselves, but it can't help us because of the mechanisms of capitalism, which again are the mechanisms, in my opinion, I think, of the id. is just uncontrolled id. Not even the id. Like, I don't want to like whatever. I don't know what it is, but some, the id as ego driven. Not the id as not the id as seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. I think there's nothing bad about that. There's nothing good about that. It's just a normal. It's just like a standard thing. It's the repressed version of that. The repressed, obsessive version of ego-driven abstraction towards absolute pleasure and the lack of absolute pain. That sort of thing. Anyway, so that kind of mechanism makes social media difficult to, like, it drives social media into the possibility. I don't want to like generalize here. I don't really think social media is that bad. But like, I know that's the message that's given usually, but I mean that clearly there is the potential in social media, and a lot of people seem to have experienced it. I've experienced it. Other friends of mine experienced it. There is an addictive quality to it. But I think it's addictive because it's pointing towards something real. That is self-expression. Like, I think we are just obsessed with self-expression as a culture. We're obsessed with it. And that's why. It's because it's important. It's because we need it. See, like, I think we get this picture sometimes. We say, oh, social media is bad because everyone's obsessed with expressing themselves. And we see the ways it's clearly bad, so therefore we should stop expressing ourselves. We're expressing ourselves too much as a culture. Okay, there may be some truth to that. Like, that might not actually be in complete disaccordance with what I'm trying to express, but I think it sits at least alongside the idea that we need to express ourselves more, especially in a system like capitalism, where desire and fear are fed to us by a system. Because it's precisely the kind of situation where anything you're going to say and think is not actually going to be you. It's going to be the system speaking through you and working through you. So it's precisely in a world like that you need self-expression. Like, if you say, oh, social media is just the result of all this kind of egoic system expression kind of channeling itself, and we need to cut it off. Well, it's like, sure, precisely because it's all that system stuff channeling itself through you, it's a sign that you're not expressing yourself, and that you need to express yourself. And you need to express yourself through social media, because it's the medium we have right now. It's a good thing, I think, to express yourself with. And I think we need to use it. It's just that the trick, I think, is to just not use it in any sort of time efficient way. Obviously, the material tendency is towards time efficiency, because well, at least one of the trends is towards time efficiency, and that might have an interesting aspect to it too. Like, I think that it all might have an interesting aspect too. I don't know, like, that videos are getting shorter, blogs are getting shorter, things are getting shorter. It's almost a cliche, right? And there is some sort of a time efficiency in that, you could say. So I could say there is a bad side to that, which is that it's self-expression trying to please others. And that if you want to rant for 40 minutes, then no, because the system itself is not going to allow you. Twitter is not going to allow you to rant on for 40 minutes unless you can create threads and whatever. But like, it's structurally not intended for that. Short videos, whatever, TikTok, Vine were not intended for that, and so on. Instagram is not intended for that, right? The structure is not intended for like expression no matter what. It's intended for expression within the bounds of a specific kind of idea of what is acceptable to people, and it's an idea that assumes that people don't want long content, that people's attention span don't want a really long thing to have to look through and read through. And that's okay. But it assumes that, and so I think it's good to fight against that. I think it's good to fight against that in the same way that it's good to fight against any systematic thing, because it's going to completely eat your mind. Otherwise, you need to fight against it. But at the same time, I think there might be something good in that. I love short content. I love Vine. I know Vine doesn't exist anymore, but I loved short videos. I love the tweet format. I love short formats. Precisely because it allows for things that the long format doesn't allow. It's the classic sort of like creativity thing where if you place yourself some sort of a limit, it stimulates creativity in some way. You say, I'm going to write something, but I can only write it in this short amount of time. It's going to stimulate creativity in some way. Limits, discipline stimulate creativity. And there are just incredible things that are made in the short format. I think it's incredible. You could say maybe that the short format is also our culture trying to stimulate its own creativity through limit. That's great. Both sides are great. I think it's just good maybe to try and bridge the war between them. Not try to say, only this should exist, you know. To try and speak out for difference. Say, okay, these short videos are great. These short, tightly edited, nicely edited videos are great. I personally love that stuff as well. But let's also speak out for badly edited, badly recorded, long videos. You know, because personally, I love watching that stuff. I've watched hours and hours of badly edited, badly recorded, long videos. Like, it's a format I like. It's just another format. It's another form of self-expression. It's not a good format or a bad format, you know? I think that we can easily get into this dangerous system of idea where we think, there are good ways of making a video and bad ways of making a video, and therefore there are good ways of expressing yourself and there are bad ways of expressing yourself. No, it's not true. So I think it's good to speak out for that in whatever way you do, in whatever way you speak out for it. Just be happy for whatever way it is that you speak out for it. Be happy for whatever way it is in which your expression is different. Yeah, so well, I think, I don't know, I'm gonna have lunch.